This is a video lecture series for middle school science where you'll be able to play this video, but at any point you'll be able to pause, fast forward, or rewind within the video. And this lesson is going to concentrate on fungus. Now, fungus is going to be its own kingdom in biology, where in the very beginning you would have two kingdoms of bacteria. One would be eubacteria, and the other one would be archaeobacteria, and then fungus will actually be its own kingdom. Now, a long time ago, it was believed that fungus was included with the plant kingdom, that a fungus was a type of plant. But soon afterwards realized that there are many different characteristics of fungus, because fungus is not able to produce its own energy, but it requires energy from the environment and from outside sources. So a fungus is actually a decomposer, and it's going to break down dead matter and material in order to get its energy. So a fungus is going to be made up of many things, but it's actually going to be pretty simple. The body of the fungus is usually a mass of many celled thread-like tubes called hyphae. So a body of the fungus itself is going to be pretty simplistic, where it's going to be made up of these thread-like tubes called hyphae, and not really much more than that. Now, all fungus are going to be saprophytes, and saprophytes are organisms that obtain food by absorbing dead or decaying tissues from other organisms. So fungus will actually get their energy from the dead and decaying matter of organisms that have passed away. So that would be trees, or goats, rabbits, birds, organisms that have passed away. The saprophytes, or like the fungus, will be able to go and absorb the energy from and the energy and the nutrients from those dead organisms, and help to be like, once again, the decomposers, or the garbage disposals of the world. So sometimes you might actually see fungus growing on like the soil, or you might see it growing on a rotting tree, or on something that's passed away. So fungi don't have specialized tissues and organs of plants, such as leaves or roots. So there's really nothing specialized in it, or there's nothing that's actually separated out into different structures within the fungus. The fungus is actually going to be pretty simple. So it's not going to be composed of different organs like leaves or roots on a plant. So some places where you might actually see fungus would be like if you eat mushrooms on like your hamburger. We also use fungus to actually make bread. So yeast is actually it's a cellular type of fungus that's used when in the presence of sugar, it'll actually release carbon dioxide. So that's what actually gives the bread its like sponginess, where you actually have these holes. Because when that bread actually has the yeast going into it, it'll actually cause the dough to rise, and then when you cook it, it'll actually have those little bubbles, which makes the bread fluffy. But now if you take bread and we actually make it moist and we leave it out for a while, it can actually get these small little black mold on them. Now that black mold is going to be a type of fungus that's there. Also as well, fungus can actually grow on people. So you can have fungus growing on like the dead cells and skin cells on like feet, or they can be in the groin area. So like on the feet, if we have a fungus growing there, that's called athlete's foot. And if we have fungus growing within the groin area, that is going to be called like jock itch, because many athletes will actually have fungus growing within that area. If there's a lot of sweating there and it's moist, and you might actually have good conditions for the growth of fungus. That's why they'll actually sell sprays or lotions or creams to be able to try to kill that fungus off. And more familiar, you might actually see fungus in like video games. But that, once again, is fantasy. Asexual and sexual reproduction in fungi usually involves the production of spores. So fungus is going to reproduce. Sometimes it'll reproduce sexually, where you'll have one fungus who will go together with another fungus, and the hyphae can actually join together to try to create a whole nother fungus. Now the hyphae is actually going to help to anchor that mushroom down, but also as well, it'll help to absorb nutrients into the mushroom. So that's why out in the wild we should never actually eat wild mushrooms, or if you see mushrooms out on the ground or out somewhere in the park, you're never supposed to eat them, because there are some mushrooms that are actually poisonous and very harmful for you to eat. So you should only trust the mushrooms that you'd find within the supermarket or the fungus that you find there, and please don't try to eat any that you find out in the wild. But asexual reproduction will occur when the hyphae joins together and like actually create a whole nother type of fungus from there. Now, asexual reproduction is going to be where the fungus actually produces spores, and that usually involves, the spores are going to be these waterproof round cellular basically cells that will actually come out from the mushroom, and when it lands on the ground, a whole nother mushroom can actually grow out from there, or a whole nother fungus can actually grow out from that location where that spore actually lands. A spore is going to be a waterproof reproductive cell that grows into a whole new organism. So when you see a mushroom, you may not only see one, you may see other ones nearby it, because spores will actually land onto the ground and a whole nother mushroom or a whole nother fungus will actually grow and appear. Now, sexual reproduction can occur when the hyphae of two genetically different fungi of the same species grow close together. So if I have two fungi that are actually growing close together, the hyphae can actually join together, and we can actually have a different fungus that grows that are the same species when they grow close together. Now, mushrooms are commonly known as a club fungus or a fungi because they're going to have like a club shape. They're going to have this top cap, and it's going to have a stalk. Their spores are produced in a club-shaped structure called the basidium, or plural, it's going to be called the basidia. So spores are going to be produced in this club-like structure that's going to be found within the club fungi. Now, the spores of these fungi are produced in a little sac-like structure called an ascus. So the ascus is going to be a sac-like structure that holds the spores of these fungi. So here is going to be an example of a club mushroom, where the top part here is going to be the cap, and then all these little slits on the bottom here is going to be called the gills. Now, inside these gills are going to be the spores, and these spores are these waterproof reproductive cells. And then down here is going to be the hyphae, which actually helps to anchor the cell, anchor the fungus down. Also, it helps to absorb nutrients, and those nutrients can actually flow up through this way. Now, there is a poisonous type of club mushroom called the death cap mushroom. Now, the death cap mushroom is going to look like edible mushrooms and something like you would normally eat, but that is actually a mushroom where even if you eat about 30 grams of that mushroom, or like a whole mushroom, it can actually cause death to occur, where it'll actually start to destroy the kidneys and the liver within the body. So that's why you do not want to eat mushrooms that you find in the wild. But here, if we look at the gills, we are going to have the basidium, where these gills are. And if we look at one of those, it's going to be a club-like structure that actually houses the waterproof reproductive cells called spores. Now, there is a type of fuzzy black mold that you can find in an old loaf of bread, and this type is called a zygospore fungus. So zygospore fungus is going to produce spores as well, and that's how it's going to reproduce, and it's going to do that in a round spore case called a sporangium. So the fungus is able to reproduce using spores. It's also able to get energy by actually taking that in through the hyphae. Now, a lichen is an organism that is made of fungus, and either a green algae or a cyanobacterium is going to be very similar to our lichen. So lichen is made of a fungus, but it also contains green algae or cyanobacterium, which allows it to try to go through some photosynthesis for its energy. So here is going to be a zygospore, where on the top over here is going to be the sporangium, which actually produces the spores. Now, if those spores actually come down onto some place, we can actually have them reproduce and create more of these fungi. So here is going to be a piece of bread. If that bread is moist, we can actually have this fuzzy black bread mold grow on there, and those are going to be our zygospores. Now, an example of the ascus is going to be this sac-like structure where we actually contain these spores inside. So the ascus is this sac-like structure that contains our spores. Now, lichens are also important in the weathering and the process of rocks. So rocks can actually be broken down into smaller pieces by lichen when they actually try to grow on to rocks. Now, some fungi interact with plant roots, and they form a network of hyphae and roots known as mycorrhizae. So mycorrhizae is going to be where we actually have hyphae and the roots joining together down inside the soil. And when that happens, the fungus helps the plant absorb more the certain nutrients from the soil better than the roots can on their own, while the plant supplies food and other nutrients to the fungi. So this is a type of mutualism that occurs where one living organism can actually help to benefit the other. So a fungus having their hyphae will help absorb the nutrients from the soil better for the plant, while the plant supplies food and gives food and other nutrients to the fungi, and they actually help each other to live and survive. So here we could have lichens actually grow on rocks, and when it does, it's going to help to break the rock down into little pieces, and that's going to be weathering, where we break the rock, which is a large rock, into smaller pieces. Now, if a forest fire ever happens, and we actually have a lot of the trees and the plants and the animals dying because of the fire that occurs within that forest, what will happen is that you'll have a lot of dead matter that's there. And that's going to be prime conditions for fungus to actually grow. So one of the types of fungus can be our lichens that can enter into this area and actually help to revive the ecosystem here. Or if I see a plant over here, the plant will have its roots going down into the ground, and I can have hyphae from fungus trying to join together with it, and that'll actually help these plants absorb nutrients faster, and it'll actually give nutrients back to the fungus. Now this, when they help each other and help each other out together, that's going to be called the mycorrhizae. The mycorrhizae is going to be an internetwork of the plant roots together with the hyphae of the fungus. So this lesson focused on hyphae, saprophytes, asexual reproduction, pisidium, ascus, sporangium, lichen, and mycorrhizae.